In an attempt to fit in, I passed the breadbasket to my mother while sitting at Aunt Linda's large oak table in the dining room the day before my brother's wedding. I smiled sweetly. I grinned quietly as I turned to see my brother across the table, who was radiant, encircled, and ecstatic. I can't wait for the ceremony tomorrow. My aunt hesitated her Pinot glass halfway to her mouth. She took a moment to glance at me. Her eyes didn't blink when she did. Her voice was low but purposeful as she replied, "Then you'd better talk to Adam tonight. You have a right to know." That was it. No follow-up, no justification, that's all. One fissure in a wall that I hadn't ventured to penetrate in years, and all of a sudden, I was out of breath. Please take a moment to subscribe to Family and Story if you have ever been the person they forget about or only think of when they need a favor. If you think that silence does not imply weakness, click like. And please leave a comment if this tale resonates with you. I'll read it, I swear. Isabelle Monroe is my name. I teach art in a high school in Portland, Oregon, and I am 29 years old. Most people believe me to be kind, keep quiet, soft-spoken. Although it's not the complete tale, they are not incorrect. Nobody goes silent for no cause. I wasn't invisible from birth. I was precisely and gradually made that way. My brother Adam was the sun when I was a child. I also learned early on not to outshine like most things in orbit. He was the boy who never let anyone down, the talented athlete and the golden child. He was so concentrated that he didn't forget to do his duties. I was irresponsible if I did forget. It was a fluke if he received a B. It was expected that I would receive an A. I tried once. Yes, I did. I remember saving for weeks to buy my mom a special piece of jewelry for her birthday when I was about 11 years old. Although it wasn't expensive, I took care to wrap it and even used pressed wildflowers from the trail close to our house to make a small card. "Isabelle, you always go overboard," she replied after opening it and giving a hazy smile. "You don't need to put forth as much effort." I sat still. She smiled as if it were a sonnet when Adam handed her a card that he had folded in half and that read, "You rock," in bubble letters. They don't all hit at once, little things like that. They gather like dust obscuring the light as they settle into the recesses of your heart. I eventually gave up looking for compliments. After that, I gave up on it. After that, unless someone asked me a question first, I stopped talking altogether. Adam went off to college, but I stayed behind to take care of Grandma Monroe when she became ill. I wasn't asked to. They simply made an assumption. For me, Mom's words were, "You've always been so dependable." Yeah, dependability, not brilliance or bravery. Similar to a doormat that never moves. I didn't cry until weeks after Grandma's death. In the art storage room at the school, I sobbed by myself while holding a piece of charcoal that broke in my hand from too much pressure. I recall wondering how long it would take for my family to notice if I disappeared today. And still, I appeared. Holidays, birthdays, and check-in texts. I acted as the reserved sister, grinning kindly. I meant it too. I wasn't playing along. I adored them, even when they failed to return my devotion. For a brief time, I allowed myself to think that perhaps something was changing when Adam called to inform me he was getting married and that I had to attend. That perhaps I wouldn't be sitting in the shadows this time. However, that was prior to Aunt Linda saying those 7 words while glancing at me across the dinner table. "You'd better talk to Adam tonight." I didn't get any sleep that evening. While the house creaked, as if recalling something it had never dared to utter aloud, I lay in the guest bedroom and listened to the wind rattling the window frame. The perfume of lavender and starch, which used to soothe me as a child, was there in the sheets. I used to feel like I belonged there, but now it just made me feel like a guest. There wasn't a single text from Adam, but my phone's screen did light up once a notification from a former pupil who had tagged me in an old class photo. I locked the phone once more and rolled onto my side after staring at his name in my contacts with my thumb hanging over the call button. Not a check-in, not a joke, not even a good night. Aunt Linda's voice kept coming to mind. You have a right to know. You know what I looked worse in the morning than I felt? Pale skin, puffy eyes, and a calm tiredness that persists even after drinking coffee. Trying not to hold my breath all night, I came downstairs with my hair twisted into a loose bun. With clinking mugs, laughter, and the aroma of jam and toast, the kitchen was already bustling. Adam was standing by the window attaching a balloon ribbon for the flower girl, while my mother and Rachel, the soon-to-be bride, were going through the catering checklist. Before anyone noticed, I observed them for a little moment. I was first noticed by Rachel. She grinned. Belle, good morning. Ah, Belle. Since college, no one has referred to me by that name. Not her, of course. Avery Rachel. It had been 5 years since I last saw her, considering that she had fled the town in a blur of silence and half-truths earlier. Not since I discovered that she was the one who had said that I wasn't prepared for commitment to Marcus, the one man I had ever really loved. That I wasn't available, too busy or too frail. Before I could give an explanation, that falsehood put an end to our relationship. What about Rachel? She never expressed regret. Never again did you speak to me. She simply packed up her belongings and left my life as if she had never intended to be there. She was now wearing a sapphire engagement ring that gleamed too brightly in the morning sun, while she stood in my aunt's kitchen chatting with my mother. I made an effort to grin. Good morning. Adam approached me and embraced me. Tomorrow is a big day, huh? He spoke in a regular voice, too typical. The words rose slowly, like a wave in my throat. I should speak with you, Aunt Linda remarked, that I'm entitled to know. I didn't utter them, though. I was unable to. Not quite yet. Rather, I said, is it possible for us to take a stroll later? Me and you alone? For a moment, his expression was one of surprise. Then he gave a nod. Yes. Following brunch. I returned the nod. I spoke steadily. My fingertips weren't. The trek never took place. Then no. Following brunch, flower arrangements were created. The cake tasting follows. The last tux fitting follows. Just a few more minutes, Adam insisted until I was still waiting, and it was almost time for supper. I found myself sitting by myself on the ancient stone bench under the willow tree in the garden behind Aunt Linda's house. It's the same one we climbed as children. I remembered how Adam had once pushed me in on a dare as I gazed at the pond in front of me. Our parents warned me not to be so sensitive, and I would emerge sobbing and drenched while he smiled. More painful than the wind were the memories. Behind me, there was a stir. Steps. Hoping it was Adam, I turned. However, it was Aunt Linda. Without asking, she sat down and brought me a mug of tea. For some time, we didn't talk. I just took a sip while listening to the distant laughter coming from the house. Then very quietly, she whispered, I wanted to tell you sooner. However, I was worried that no one else would support me. I stared at her perplexed. Tell me what? She looked directly forward. Rachel, don't you already know her? I gave a nod. We were the best of friends. Once, just a few months after Marcus, she started dating Adam. Perhaps you knew, I thought. However, your mother maintained that you were okay with it. I was unable to respond. My hands were cold. The tea had an ashy flavor. I informed your mom that it wasn't appropriate. However, Linda sighed when she noted that it would only upset you unnecessarily. Isabelle, you deserve to know the truth. And you have the right to choose how to handle it. The sky was now a soft pink color. Rachel's chuckle drifted through the open window like smoke from somewhere inside the home. I shut my eyes. Moreover, for the first time in forever, something started to rise within me. Not rage, not retaliation. However, something more subdued, something stable. My thoughts were still tangled like yarn in my chest when I walked back into the home that evening as the sun sank behind the trees and created long shadows on the yard. Nobody gave me a different look. Not Adam, not Rachel, not your mother. They were all still grinning as they went about their tasks, as if everything were lovely fortunate and just the way it should be. The ease with which they could overlook the floor gaps while I felt as though I were falling through them was quite unnerving. It was noisy during dinner. It's too loud. Everyone applauded as Rachel stood up to give a brief but heartfelt speech about love and family and how fortunate she was to be joining such an amazing group of people. Like it was the last scene of a Hallmark film, my mother dabbed the corner of her eye. Adam smiled. I also gave a clap, silently, because even when I was unable to feel my hands, I did just that. The last practice took place in the living room following dinner. Apparently, I was going to be one of the honorary bridesmaids because someone handed me a bunch of fake roses. I had heard of it first. The software did not include my name. As usual, I nodded and grinned. Then it was time for Rachel and Adam to stand together for a fictitious reading of their vows. They all formed a semicircle. Behind my mother, I stood. Beside me, Aunt Linda stood with her arms crossed and her eyes more alert than normal. Rachel held Adam's hand and started using a piece of ivory stationery to read her speech. With a soft, too-light voice, she remarked, "I've always thought that love finds us when we're ready, and when we met, it felt like everything in my life had been leading to that moment. I had a quake in my stomach, the kind that signals the approach of a storm. I thought I already understood what love was, Adam, but losing what I believed I had allowed me to find what I truly needed." She gave me a fleeting glance too brief for anybody else to notice, but I could see and feel the glimmer of satisfaction. It was a message, not a coincidence. All of a sudden, I realized that it wasn't simply about Adam or Marcus. It wasn't love blossoming by accident. It was planned quiet and precise. Rachel had taken what I didn't say out and used it to build a life for herself. When I discovered Adam later that evening in the hallway next to the coat closet, I gently stopped him and asked, "Can we talk?" He followed me outside to the back porch after nodding and looking around to make sure no one was looking. The air smelled of warm wood and newly cut grass, and the cicadas were humming. I started by saying, "I watched Rachel's speech. She talked about losing what she believed she had." Adam's forehead creased. "Yeah, I liked it. It was poetic. Did you know she and I had a falling out?" I asked, nodding slowly. "I mean, she mentioned something," he said, hesitating. "But Belle, that was years ago." "She was with Marcus," I stated in a composed tone. "She told him lies about me, made sure he walked away." Adam glanced toward the railing on the porch. "I was unaware of all of that." "And when did the two of you begin dating?" I inquired. His hands were rubbed together. "A few months later." "But I didn't think it was important, Belle. You didn't bring him up again." "I assumed you had moved on." I inquired, "Did Mom know?" He gave a nod. "And she told you not to tell me?" He responded with silence. We stood there for a long time. He gazed into the darkness. I was attempting to prevent my fragments from slipping through the porch's slats. At last he replied, I wanted you at the wedding. I believed that we could all go on. Ma. My voice remained steady as I said, I was never given the choice to. Even I was taken aback. Adam gave me a look at that moment. Truly took a look at me. I briefly noticed something in his expression which could have been sorrow or guilt. But it was over soon enough. I apologize, he said. It had a tiny sound. I gave one nod. After that, I realized how far I had strayed from home as I made my way back inside, walking through a house filled with alcohol, laughing, and sparkling lights. I had my rehearsal dinner dress hanging in the closet. Soft fabric, pale blue with a straightforward neckline. That night, I silently ironed it, the metal moving gently over each crease, and the steam rising like breath, as if with enough effort I might bring order out of the chaos. They would have their ideal ceremony tomorrow. However, I had one more thing to offer. I got up earlier than the sun on the morning of the rehearsal dinner. There was a deep hush in the home, as if it were waiting for something to break. Holding my dress in my lap, as if it may provide me with guidance, I sat at the side of the bed with my feet on the chilly floor. Light blue, neat lines, no adornment. Simply put, similar to me. For years I had worked on shrinking myself to make place for better people. To avoid coming across as challenging, I had spoken softly. I had persuaded myself that I would never need anything if I wasn't a burden. However, something had changed. It began with a statement from Aunt Linda and became more complicated with each look, each pause, and each revelation. When Adam got the front room with the large window, and I got the one close to the attic with the creaking pipes there, I was sitting on the edge of the same bed I had slept on as a young child during our Christmas visit. At the time, I didn't mind. I didn't think to ask for more at the time. I took a slow shower. Dressed slowly. I applied my makeup as usual, sparingly, carefully, and subtly. However, I no longer appeared invisible when I gazed in the mirror. I appeared worn out, but steady. The meal took place in a rented hall on the outskirts of town, complete with linen-draped tables, white walls, and string lights. A night of toasts, laughter, and reciting old family tales was what was intended to happen. Aunts, cousins, Adam's college pals, and folks I hadn't seen since high school were already there when I got there. Rachel was dressed in a champagne-colored silky gown. She had the flawless, pristine appearance of a painting. She glided from guest to guest, hand on arm, head tilted in laughter, and I stood at the edge of the room observing her for a time. She had the ability to enchant any space. Not much had changed in that regard. I looked across the buffet line at Aunt Linda. She nodded once to me, compact but sturdy, like a soft breeze shoving me from behind. Dinner went by quickly. I didn't taste much. Like music in a dream, the hum of discussion swept over me. The speeches followed. Adam's college mate, the best man, spoke first and delivered a lengthy tale about a road trip and a flat tire in the middle of nowhere. People chuckled. The next to speak was Rachel's sister, then their preacher. My mother then got to her feet. She cleared her throat, grinned. She held her wine glass like a microphone and said, I just wanted to say how proud I am of both of you. You've brightened our lives so much, Rachel. Adam, you have always been a source of pride for this family. She never gave me a glance. Adam pressed a fork against his glass as she sat down. He stood up and said, Belle, do you want to say something? For a moment there was silence. Everyone looked in my direction. My mom's face went cold. Rachel's grin wavered. I got up. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands remained steady. With the microphone cool in my hand, I approached the front of the room carefully, my heels clicking on the wood floor. I took a look at everyone, including strangers, friends, and relatives, before starting. I used to think love looked like loud applause when I was little, I added quietly. Like being picked, honored, and noticed. I waited for that to settle. But as I grew older, I discovered that love may be quiet at times. It manifests itself in the little things, similar to holding the door, recalling the tale, registering, even if it is inconvenient. People were paying attention. In their silence, I saw it. I've tried to be the easy one for most of my life, the trustworthy one, the one who doesn't flinch. And for a while, I thought that was sufficient, that perhaps I could get a small seat at the table if I kept out of the way. I stopped. Some glanced down. However, I've discovered that people rarely ask you to keep quiet because they respect your tranquility. It's because they place a higher importance on comfort. For a moment, my gaze strayed to Rachel. She didn't flinch. This past weekend, I came here to help my brother, to stand at his side since sisters do that, even if the price isn't obvious, even when nobody questions what it took to get there. There was silence in the room. Even the sound of cutlery clinking had ceased. And I believe I've accomplished it. I've arrived. Again and again. That's what I'm saying. I'm taking a step back. Not with resentment, not because I was angry, but out of affection. For me. I gave a soft smile. I hope the best for you too. Really. I hope this marriage gives you the depth and honesty I once thought possible. I put down the microphone. I then left. Not in a hurry. Staying steady. Simply be steady. And cost-free. When I went outside, the night air was cold. Just cold enough to cause my arms' flesh to stiffen beneath my dress's thin sleeves. The oak tree's shadows stretched across the sidewalk like gentle fingers, and the parking lot was largely deserted. I had no strategy. I wasn't sure if I would say anything at all beforehand. But as soon as I was standing there in front of them, all the words seemed to have been waiting for years. They were hidden behind every kind smile I had ever made and folded under each time I moved aside to give someone else the opportunity to speak. There was nothing more to explain now. I observed the wind rippling over the tall grass at the property's edge as I stood close to the curb. In the background, cars drove by. A gentle hum of everyday existence continuing as usual, utterly oblivious to the fact that something had subtly exploded inside of me. The door behind me opened a few minutes later. Steps. Hesitant. Adam was the one. He said Belle, without being too close or too distant. That was. He didn't complete it. I took a moment to look at him. I simply continued to look at the woods. You ought to return inside, I murmured softly. You have visitors. He stood silently for a long time. I didn't mean for it to go this way, he added. No, I answered. You intended it to proceed in silence. Like he was preparing for a collision, he let out a breath through his nose. I was unaware of its depth. Beside Rachel, beside Marcus, I believed it to be only a falling out. I turned to him at last and said, You didn't ask. That's the painful part. He cast his gaze downward. You're correct. The wind increased. Like they didn't care who was looking, a few leaves skipped over the gravel and fell across the lot. He said, I want you there tomorrow. During the ceremony, I gave a sad, gentle smile. I am certain that you do. However, I don't believe it's for me. He went on to say, She still loves you in her own way, as if that would help. Perhaps, I replied. However, she still took from me, and nobody intervened to stop her. Adam didn't dispute. He was wise enough not to attempt it. He said, I'll let them know you weren't feeling well. I gave one nod. It's okay. He paused. Will I see you once more? I inhaled deeply before peering into his eyes, the same eyes I used to gaze into on Christmas mornings, summer bike rides, and late-night laughter under blankets. Eyes that formerly signified home. I'm not sure, I replied. However, Adam, I hope you're content. I genuinely do. I turned after that. I went to my car on foot. I let the chilly air hit my face one more time as I cautiously opened the door. I refrained from crying. It was because something else had taken root, not because I wasn't in pain. Not numbness, not rage, calm. It wasn't noisy. There was no applause for it. However, it was present, sure and quiet. That evening, I turned off the radio and drove back to Aunt Linda's with the windows partly down. Only the constant rhythm of tires on asphalt and the sound of the wind. No calls, don't text, nothing but quiet. The type that was earned. She was waiting at the kitchen table when I entered. Her hands were encircling a mug of tea that had most likely gone cold, and she was still wearing her cardigan and trousers. She didn't inquire about what transpired. I didn't elaborate. She got to her feet, went to the cupboard, and poured another cup. Then she slid it in my direction across the table. For a long time, we sat in that position, not speaking, just taking a sip, inhaling, existing. And I paused in front of the antique mirror on the landing before going upstairs to bed. I stared at myself for a while, not to see how I seemed, but now that no one else was telling me I wanted to see who I truly was. The wedding was not attended by me. More out of habit than anything else, I got up early the following morning. As though it knew it was carrying something important, the home was much more silent than normal. The wood floor felt cool under my feet as I walked downstairs in my robe and bare feet. Aunt Linda had already woken up, but she wasn't in the kitchen, and the air had a subtle scent of toast and cinnamon. "Take your time today," was written in her slanted handwriting on a letter that was placed on the table. "You deserve it." For a long time, I gazed at those words. Despite being only 2 brief statements, they had a deeper impact than anything I had heard from my mother in a long time. During those years of providing care, when the mornings arrived before I was ready and the quiet was too loud to ignore, I poured a cup of coffee without any cream or sugar. I observed the light coming in through the lace curtains while I sat near the window. Birds fluttered between the branches of the ancient magnolia tree across the grass. For a little period, I pondered the appearance of the wedding location. I imagined the sound of dresses rustling in a quiet gathering, white folding chairs, and thoughtfully placed centerpieces. It's possible that someone was crying. Rachel's mother might have been adjusting her veil. Perhaps my own mother was acting as though everything was fine. Perhaps Adam kept looking toward the door. I didn't become upset. I wasn't arrogant. I simply sensed, finished. I gathered my keys, put on a cardigan, and got into the car in the middle of the morning. Until I passed the ancient library on Maple Street and noticed the community art center across from it, the one I had visited as a teenager and had hoped would one day grow into something larger. I had no idea where I was heading. Like a faded picture in a wallet, it had always been in the back of my mind. The notion of making room for children who required breathing room. There's room to be creative, space to be seen without fear. After parking in front of it, I made my way around the side and peered through the dusty windows. Not much had changed in the area. The sign remained tilted. Volunteers created the artwork on the side wall more than 10 years ago, but it was starting to peel at the corners. However, it still had life in it. It was visible to me. I sensed it. Perhaps it was time to quit waiting for approval, I reasoned. I went back to the car, unlocked the glove box, and took out the little folder I had been holding onto for years, nestled amongst extra napkins and insurance documents. There were expense estimates, grant research, and illustrations inside. No one ever asked me what I wanted. Therefore, I never spoke out loud about my dreams. I touched the top page's corner with my thumb. I didn't require attention. I didn't require a platform. All I wanted was one location where I could put my all into anything without fear of rejection. I returned to Aunt Linda's in the early afternoon. She was sitting on the porch using thick mustard yellow yarn to crochet something. She murmured, "You didn't go," without raising her gaze. I took a seat next to her. "No." She gave a nod. "Well done." I gave a small smile. I went to the art center by car. She took a break from stitching, glanced over. "Are you considering revisiting those previous plans?" I gave a nod. She looped the yarn slowly and said, "I think you'd be brilliant at it." I took a while to respond. I simply listened to the gentle tug of yarn and the porch swing's sporadic squeak. I muttered, "I think I'm sick of shrinking." "Then halt," she said. It was the most straightforward counsel I had ever received. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, sat down on the couch with a battered notebook, and started drawing up a fresh plan that night while the rest of the town was clinking drinks and dancing under fairy lights. Not for them, not to establish anything. However, for me. The wind outside increased, rattling the branches as if it were attempting to wake something that had been asleep for too long, and the sky changed from amber to navy. That evening, I didn't answer my phone, not even when Adam called. Silence doesn't always mean punishment. Their goal is to protect what remains. The following morning, it rained. It was a steady, whispering rain, not a storm, the kind that softens the world and clings to the windows. The sky remained gray while I observed it from the living room, the tea in my hands getting colder. The nuptials were over. Most likely the visitors had left. The petals would be curling around the margins of the withering flowers, the chairs that were least folded. The remaining cake was forgotten and boxed. I pondered whether Adam realized the full impact of what had been said the previous evening when he woke up next to Rachel that morning. My words echoed in the silence as if some part of him could hear them. Or perhaps, like so many others, he had already pushed it all into the innocuous, hazy area of his mind. Once more, my phone buzzed. It was the second time that morning. I knew who it was without having to look. Rather, I placed it on the table face down and moved toward the window. The old swing swayed softly in the yard, its ropes dark and wet from the rain. The bottoms of my shoes pressed on the soil as I pushed myself back and forth while sitting on that swing as a kid. I used to think I could lift off by swinging hard enough. I wanted to vanish into the sky above the trees so that no one could identify me. I never truly lost that aspect of me. I had to take out the folder once again at the end of the afternoon. The pages were spread out on the kitchen table. Budget templates, grant deadlines, and local outreach contacts. Aunt Linda calmly took over, made herself a cup of tea, and sat across from me without saying a word. I resumed my mapping out of the art center. I remarked. She gave a nod. "It's about time." I felt stronger than I have in years because of the way she expressed it, not astonished, nor hesitant, just certain. I said, "I don't have everything figured out yet." "You're not required to," she stated. "You're not a woman who waits for the right moment. You're the type who prepares from the outset." I gazed at the blueprint sketch that I had created years prior. A large, open area with large window supply racks and antique easels that were taken from school storage rooms. I had written the titles of classes I had envisioned teaching in the margins: free expression workshops for children too quiet to draw attention, sculpture classes for adolescent ladies, and painting classes for grief rehabilitation. I was going to give what I didn't receive. Retaliation was never the goal. It has to do with recovery. I took a stroll around the neighborhood that evening. The streets were still glistening, even though the rain had ceased. It appeared as though the earth had been cleansed by the sky. I heard televisions whispering softly through screen doors and saw houses with porch lights flashing on. Life is proceeding as it ought to. A voicemail awaited me when I got back. Adam once more. This time his voice was strained. Keep quiet. Hey, I guess I understand now. I do. You weren't worthy of being excluded in that manner. I was self-centered. Although I didn't want to spoil the weekend, I did ruin something more significant, didn't I? I simply hope that one day we will be able to begin anew. I gave it a listen once. Then again, I didn't remove it. However, I didn't reply either. Not everything requires a response. Some things simply require room. I typed one line across the top of a new page in my notepad that evening. Create your own spot at the table, girls who were never the favorite. I wrote the name after that. The Hearth Project. It had a warm sound, secure, known, just what I didn't have, and all I was prepared to become. A few weeks passed before I was able to reintegrate. Not all at once, not in a big manner. However, in tiny, consistent rhythms, mornings when I woke up without a heavy feeling in my chest, afternoons when quiet felt like relaxation rather than punishment, and evenings when I didn't relive previous talks in the hopes of finding new words. Without much fanfare, I made my way back to Portland. Adam was the only one from the wedding to get in touch. After the voicemail, he delivered a brief, yet heartfelt note. I didn't block him, but I also didn't reply. I simply left things alone. Like a once-living entity that needed time to become a part of the land. My absence had gone unnoticed by the children at school. Adolescents have their own worlds. However, after class, I received a folded note from one of my quieter girls, Ava, a watercolorist who hardly talked louder than a whisper, saying, "I hope your trip gave you peace." I secured it to my desk's side using tape. On most days after work, I would stroll to the small lot next to Hawthorne and 14th, where an old shop I had seen 100 times had a faded "For Lease" sign hanging in the window. I had applied for a grant, run the numbers, and talked to the landlord. Not yet certain. However, the key was now kept in my purse on a ring. On certain days, I just unlocked the door to stand inside and visualize it being filled. Student work was displayed on the walls. There's laughter. Aprons splattered with paint. A dusty stereo in the corner is playing music. As clear as early light, I could already see it. The Hearth Project. I wasn't instructed to do that. I was not given permission. Perhaps that's why it felt so natural. It was mine, molded by years of silent observation being ignored and developing the ability to view people differently than I had. I discovered an antique ceramic teapot at a flea sale one Saturday afternoon. Pale yellow with hand-painted violets curling around the sides and a small chip near the spout. I thought my grandmother would have adored it. I purchased it and placed it on the shelf behind the counter after bringing it to the studio. I didn't yet have electricity tables or even mugs. However, it seemed like a start. After returning home that evening, I cuddled up on the couch with a book I had been intending to read for months and lit a candle on the ledge. The city hummed outside, with cars going by, a dog barking 2 blocks away, and leaves being brushed along the pavement by the wind. I took in my apartment's surroundings. Not very fancy. Used furnishings. A crooked bookcase. Faded carpet, but warm. Resided there. Mine. After getting up and wrapping a blanket around my shoulders, I made my way to the balcony. The promise of spring was in the crisp, chilly air. As the twilight light faded, the neighbor's wind chime across the street tinkled quietly. A child's laughter reverberated down the alley somewhere below. Then, without giving it any thought, I took the note I had written to myself the night before the wedding out of my pocket. The person who stated, "Create your own spot at the table, girls who were never the favorite." I folded it with care, slipped it into a letterbox. Did not write a name on it. No address for return. Only the words, "To whoever comes next in need." I also left it on a seat in front of the former community garden the following morning. As I left, I lifted the corner like a farewell wave, letting the wind carry it a little. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. Not every story ends with applause. They conclude with a sigh, a stride forward, and the quiet, deliberate sound of your own feet at last moving in the direction you have selected.